What's it called?
It's called the Game Boy.
The Game Boy, a word that brings us to nostalgic period of 90s when the first handheld consoles were introduced and opened a whole new era of 8-bit portable consoles. The first Game Boy original was released 34 years ago, in 1989. It was featuring 2-inch dot matrix green screen and could hold up to 15 hours of gaming with 4 AA batteries. 9 years later, Nintendo introduced a new version of Game Boy with a colorful screen and called it the Game Boy Color. Both Nintendo Game Boys were sold over 118 million copies, being among the most popular consoles of all time. Nowadays, retro gaming became highly popular, bringing all the retro enthusiasts all over the world together and giving a second life to old game consoles. In this video, I will be taking a look at 30+ years old Game Boy Color and will try to make the ultimate modification to make it look like a cool retro device with a modern upgrade. So let's get started. I have bought my first ever Game Boy Color in a bundle together with Game Boy Advance SP for about $90, meaning that it cost me approximately $45. Sounds a lot for a regular person, considering that it is 34 years old console. But retro gaming collectors are spending hundreds of dollars for similar consoles, like Game Boy Micro, which nowadays has the highest price tag on eBay. The condition of the Game Boy looked average, but considering that I will be modifying it, the only thing that matters is its motherboard. According to description, Game Boy had issues with the sound, which should be a pretty easy fix if it is not related to some motherboard problem. You have already saw me unpacking Game Boy Color from one of my previous videos. By the way, modifying GBASP turned out to be a great project, so go ahead and check it out using the link from the top right corner. Game Boy Color features 2.3 inches color LCD that supports only 56 different colors on the screen simultaneously. The housing of the Game Boy was a bit redesigned and became more slimmer, considering its predecessor Game Boy Original. The console features 5 control buttons, an 8-way directional D-pad, which has become a standard for the most retro handheld consoles, along with A, B, start and select buttons. The sound is produced by one built-in mono speaker, controlled by a wheel located on the left side. Near the sound wheel, there's a link cable port that enables multiplayer mode for up to 4 players connected by cable. This was really something revolutionary considering it was 1997. On the right side of the housing, a switch toggle is used to power the device on or off, while a power LED indicator on the left side shows the device power status. The bottom of the housing features a DC 3V in port, designed for connecting a power adapter as alternative power source. Additionally, there's 3mm headphone jack for producing stereo audio. On the top right corner, there's a small hole, designed for attaching a wrist hand rope to prevent accidental falls. Also, you'll find an AR sensor on the top of the handheld, intended for wireless communication between two Game Boy systems. On the back, there's a cartridge slot for reading games. Game Boy Color features processor that is a combination of Intel 8080 and Zilog Z80. It has a clock speed of 4 MHz, 32 KB of RAM and 16 KB of VRAM. For a comparison, latest Nintendo Switch has a processor which is 255 times faster and RAM which is 130,000 times faster than Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Color was backward compatible with original Game Boy games, allowing users to enjoy a vast library of titles. Let me try to power up this device and check its functionality. The only game I own for Game Boy Color is Crazy Castle 3, so I'll be testing that. The first thing I noticed, there's no sound. The game loaded smoothly, but the button seems to be not that responsive. Unfortunately, the Game Boy Color is almost unplayable. Because of the screen missing backlight and without sound, there is no fun to play it at all. Besides that, I got some additional features that I would like to add to this Game Boy. So it's time to upgrade it. Here's my game plan. Step 1. I will investigate whether the sound issue is caused by motherboard or it is simply the speaker itself. Step 2. I will add button slide kit to spice up the look of the Game Boy even more. Step 3. The original yellow housing will be swapped with a new clear black shell, along with a complete set of replacement buttons, giving the Game Boy a new interesting look. Step 4. I will replace the old display with a state-of-art IPS screen module, bringing along some additional features to the screen. To diagnose the sound issue, whether it originates from the motherboard or the speaker, without even disassembly Game Boy, I will use a pair of headphones to check for audio output. Fortunately, I can hear the game sound through the headphones, boosting my confidence that the problem likely lies with the speaker. Now let's proceed to disassemble the console and confirm this theory. I will begin by unscrewing 6 screws, 4 on the back and additional 2 beneath the battery compartment. Once the back cover is removed, I'll have a clear view of the white Game Boy PCB. Now I see the reason why the speaker was not working. One of the contacts is not soldered to the motherboard. I can easily replace the speaker without even disassembling the Game Boy, but as I will be doing some other modifications, I will need to have access to the motherboard anyway. The motherboard is secured to the front housing by 3 additional screws. First, I will remove the power switch button and Ihor sensor cover. To disconnect the screen flex cable, I need to pop up these 2 tabs simultaneously, and then the ribbon flex cable can be easily disconnected from the motherboard. With the screen being disconnected and additional removal of 3 screws, I can extract the Game Boy PCB. The Game Boy motherboard does not look that bad, having somewhere on the buttons contacts and some dust on the soldering pads. After additional inspection, I have noticed that the old speaker cannot be restored, so I need to replace it with new one. The wires that were connected to the speaker were not properly soldered, that's why I decided to restore them first. Now I can solder restored wires to the new speaker. Once it is done, I can proceed assembling the Game Boy to check if the speaker is working. To my surprise, the Game Boy was still not reproducing any sound. I wasn't expecting that. Later, I have noticed that one of the speaker's soldering contacts was burnt out, causing the speaker to stop working. After checking the Game Boy PCB schema, I found alternative connection points for a speaker, plus side of capacitor C38 and top of capacitor C14. The top of capacitor C14 wasn't showing any continuity with broken speaker joint, so this is the one I should be working with. Off camera, I soldered a wire between top joint of capacitor C14 and one side of the speaker. The other side of the speaker was soldered to working speaker contact on the motherboard. To save time for assembling and disassembling the console, I used a battery box with a pair of crocodile clips. This time, speaker was finally producing sound. Unfortunately, there were still some problems, as the speaker was not that loud. After checking the PCB schema again, I found that it might be caused by capacitor C38, so I bought a replacement for it. Before fully removing old capacitor, I decided to test the Game Boy with new capacitor independently. I soldered 2 wires onto positive and negative terminals of new capacitor, attaching the positive side to the speaker and the negative side to the negative terminal of the old capacitor. Upon testing the new capacitor, I successfully achieved the desired outcome. The speaker was loud enough and produced good audio. Next, I removed the old capacitor and soldered the new one to its place. It should look like this when the job is done. Now I can proceed with placing the button slide kit on the Game Boy motherboard. Initially, I must align the lights kit with the Game Boy PCB to ensure that soldering spots are in correct position. To secure it in place during the soldering process and prevent any movement, I will use Kapton tape. The button slide kit has 10 solder joints, but not all of them will be used. The first solder joint corresponds to the select button, the second to start button, and the third and fourth to B and A buttons respectively. The fifth joint is for 5-volt power, the sixth for ground, and the seventh serves as anchor to hold the board in place. I will solder all of them. The 8th joint is intended for connecting to the VDD or VCC on the motherboard to indicate low battery status when using a lithium battery. It is not applicable in my case, as I will be using regular AA batteries. The select and start joints on the left can also serve as alternative solder points for the IPS screen kit, which I plan to add to this modification. But there is a catch. If you use a multimeter in continuity mode, touching one probe to the select button and the other to the start button will yield continuity. If you switch the second probe to the select button, continuity won't be detected, and the same holds true for the start button. This indicates that labeling of the select and start buttons on this component is swapped. I will go ahead and solder pads to them, intending to later attach the wires for the IPS screen kit. The button slide kit works perfectly, and I can proceed with IPS screen installation. This step involves preparing the IPS screen kit, which includes the pre-laminated IPS screen, an additional connector flex cable, and some wires. To enable color changes for the GameBoy logo on the front panel and maintain optimal brightness on the LCD screen, 3 wires need to be soldered between the ribbon flex cable and the GameBoy motherboard. Although the screen can function without this step, skipping it will limit front panel logo color customization and slightly reduce screen brightness. I will tin the pads to the power joint and then solder a short wire. Similarly, I repeat the process for the joints marked start and select, using 2 other longer wires. To ensure the screen functionality, I connected the ribbon flex cable to the GameBoy PCB. After connecting the ribbon flex cable to the motherboard, inserting batteries, and attempting to turn it on, the screen worked fluidly. With this confirmation, I can proceed to finalize the placement of the IPS screen module. Now I need to put the new IPS screen to replacement front housing. After removing the stickers, I can mount the new screen to the front panel. With a bit of pressure, it is securely placed into the housing. Next, I will remove the sticker from the ribbon cable and put it in place. Once the screen ribbon cable is connected, I can proceed soldering the wires. The power wire previously soldered should be connected to the pin labeled C on the main power switch of the GameBoy PCB. As for the other 2 wires, they need to be linked to the select and start buttons, and fortunately the button slide kit offers this option. It is important to keep in mind that select and start are not properly marked on the button slide kit, so you need to swap them. To ensure that wires are properly secured, I'll use Captain tape. In this modification, the old housing is no longer necessary, as the new screen module requires adjustment to the old shell through cutting. Additionally, the old buttons and rubber pads appear to be worn, so I will put them aside and will work with new parts only. Although the new shell kit initially included buttons and rubber pads, they are incompatible with the new button slide kit. Thankfully, the button slide kit comes with both transparent buttons and rubber pads. I will insert the new buttons into the front panel, followed by the rubber pads. Once it is done, I can flip the GameBoy motherboard into place. I will place new power switch and AR sensor cover. Next, I need to place the touch sensor under the housing and stick it to the front panel. Once it is done, I will position the speaker properly and secure GameBoy PCB with screws into the case. To complete the assembly, I'll attach the new back housing by securing all 6 screws and insert new batteries. Now I can peel off the protective film from the screen. And there you have it, the newly modified GameBoy Color is ready to go. A new IPS screen is a game changer for this Game Boy. It is 25% larger than original one and offers a lot of new features. Adjusting the screen brightness is made easy by tapping the touch sensor, with 7 levels available to suit your environment. Max brightness enables sunny day gameplay, while minimum brightness enhances comfort during nighttime sessions. Long pressing the touch sensor allows you to switch between different display modes. Various options with different grid lines provide that nostalgic Game Boy look, or you can turn off the grids entirely. The IPS screen keeps the chosen display mode and brightness even after the console was restarted. There is a hidden feature for changing the logo color beneath the pre-illuminated IPS screen. Initially red, you can customize the entire logo and screen alignment with the press and hold of select and start buttons. Once you enter edit mode, pressing the sensor on the top once will allow you to change the screen alignment vertically. Pressing second time will allow you to change screen alignment horizontally. By pressing the sensor third time, you will enter color mode, where you can change the logo color or switch the lights off completely. In addition to the new screen, there's installed button slide kit that offers extensive customization. Upon the first power up, the lights are in RGB mode. Pressing select plus A or B buttons changes the color, while start plus A or B adjusts brightness. Switching colors in RGB mode will take some time, so you need to be patient if you want to achieve needed color. By holding A plus B for 2 seconds, you will activate the breathing LED effect. Holding A plus B buttons for the third time will activate white mode, and pressing A plus B for the fourth time will turn off the LED lights completely. And now let me talk about new replacement shell. Honestly, I believe it not only looks but also feels like the original when holding in your hands. I love that LED PCB kit shares the same color as the Game Boy motherboard, seamlessly blending in. I think this modification turned out to be an interesting project and absolutely maxed out my expectations. The new IPS screen put a fresh breath of life into the outdated Game Boy console, while the LED light kit enables various customization for the button's look. Additionally, the new replacement shell creates the impression that this Game Boy was recently manufactured. During this project, I have learned some interesting things that I would like to share. When I disassembled the console, the power switch started to glitch, and it was not working all the time, so I tried to clean it first, but then decided to resolder it and clean it inside. Somehow I killed 2 fuses which were responsible for powering the device, and so I got them replaced as well. The soldering joints for select and start buttons didn't work for the IPS screen kit. I was not able to do any adjustment for logo. After doing some research, I soldered them to different solder joints that were provided by the seller. The IPS screen had some glitch. From time to time, it was not fully lighting up the Game Boy logo, causing such weird look. After checking description from the screen listing, I have found it's a common problem and can be fixed by pressing select and start buttons for 8 seconds. So keep in mind about potential issues you can face during this upgrade. But was it worth to do the modification? My honest answer, sure it was. Was it cheap? Not quite. The Game Boy Color itself set me back around $45. The button slide kit, inclusive all of the buttons and rubber pads, costed close to $22, and the housing plus IPS kit totaled approximately $53. So in total, the upgraded version of the Game Boy Color costed around $120. If you have Game Boy Color laying somewhere around, the upgrade will cost you about $75, which I think is an excellent deal. If you like this video, smash that like button. If you want to see more, hit subscribe button. And I see you in the next one. Peace!